Hello and welcome to another Industry Careers for PhDs podcast brought to you by Cheeky Scientist. I'm your host, Isaiah Henkel, and today we will be talking with Erin Krolikiewicz on recruiting in the biopharmaceutical industry. Specifically, Erin is a talent acquisition specialist with Genentech. If you'd like to hear the entire interview, go to cheekyscientist.com/association, where you can learn how to not only get access to all of our interviews, but learn how to get access to our complete job blueprint, our job search blueprint for PhDs, as well as our private PhD level job referral network. Again, that's cheekyscientist.com/association. If you want all of our podcasts delivered to your inbox as they come out, as well as all of our free articles, just go to our homepage, cheekyscientist.com, and enter your name and email address at the bottom of the homepage. And finally, you can get access to all of our podcasts at any time on iTunes. So again, today we will be talking with Erin Krolikiewicz on recruiting in biopharma. We'll get started and jump in now. So thank you, Erin, for being with us. We're very excited to talk to you.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Okay, so thank you everyone for the warm welcome. Do me a favor and welcome Erin in the chat box if you would. It's not every day that we get to have on someone who's had such in-depth experience working with multiple top companies. And it's great to have you on. So we'd like to always start fairly simple here and kind of break down, some of the misconceptions and really how recruiting and talent acquisition works. But before that, maybe you can just start very simply and kind of walk us through, give us a general overview of the overall hiring process for a company like Genentech, Amgen, and so forth.
So Genentech, as many of you know, is the first biotech company ever to be in business. We're 40 years old and we're part of the Roche family. So we're actually part of the large pharmaceutical organization, Roche, which employs about 80,000 people across the world. Genentech is located in South San Francisco. We have about 15,000 employees that are working in research and development and also all the supporting functions for making drugs. So the process is very unique in large pharma because we have so many different roles and skill sets that we do try to fill. So I would say the first step in the process for recruitment is really to identify the need. So this is something that individuals like myself do with the business is we look at what needs we have, whether that's in research or development or other areas. And then we will work with different support functions in HR, like compensation, our HR business partners, and so on, to really define what that skill set would look like. And then from there, the process begins where we start looking for candidates. We will post the position publicly, as many of you probably see on our website or on LinkedIn or Indeed, other sites. And then we start looking at resumes and talking with candidates who could be prospectively a good fit for the role.
Great. And, no curveballs there for everyone who's listening in terms of what to expect and how the process works. Now, one thing that we get a kind of a wide variety of perspectives and opinions on is when we break it down and we talk about resumes specifically, because some recruiters, talent acquisition, they say, you know what? Of course, we don't get through every resume, right? We get through the resumes that come in earliest first. Of course, we look. Some say we look at every resume. Some say that we have the applicant tracking software weed out some of it. For in your experience, what have you seen in terms of the resumes that come in? Which ones are actually looked at? How quickly they're filtered through? What filtering systems you used, even human or automated?
Yes. So at this time, the closest thing we have to automation is that we may have questions up front that a candidate must answer. If the role is specific to a certain skill set that requires a level of degree or education, then that's one of the questions that may be automated and attached to applying for a position. But we do not use any artificial intelligence at this time to sort candidates through. The resumes are actually viewed by humans, so we are looking at the resumes to see who would be a fit for the positions based on the candidate skill set and the criteria that's set forth on the job description.
Okay, so when you're looking at a resume, well, us talk about this. So depending, and I'm sure there's different teams on different departments. What would be the ratio of resumes that come in versus humans looking at them, and how many resumes per open position on average? I'm sure it varies widely, but any of these kind of numbers are really help everybody, especially who's coming into a job search new, understand in terms of perspective what kind of competition's out there.
Yeah, so I think a really good bench to consider would be thinking about the level of the position. So obviously an entry level position that has very light requirements, let's say a bachelor's degree with, a couple years of experience, there's probably going to be a lot of candidates that apply directly for that position. So if that's a position like a biologist or a chemist type position, then there's going to be a lot of individuals that we have to sort through. What we
Like
do
hundreds?
practice, hundreds. So what we
Hundreds.
do practice at Genentech is if we get to a certain point where the position has been open for a couple weeks and we have vetted through, let's say, the first 25% of the applicants that have come through, and we've identified a pool that would be a match for the position, then we usually will not continue to keep the position open, or we will not continue to keep looking at more and more resumes. We have to draw a line somewhere when it comes to candidate selection.
And it's just temporal, like the earliest. There's a ranking for the time that those resumes come in. So people need to be setting up Google alerts basically and like waiting for the postings.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we haven't really talked a lot
idea
about Google alerts before for those of you listening, but it's something you should do. Just go to google.com/alert and you can set up an alert for any keyword. Thank you for that clarification. That's great to know.
Mm-hmm.
And you said 25%, so really there's hundreds and hundreds of resumes that don't get looked at. Is there something that you do in terms of zeroing in on keywords other than just job? I mean, obviously we know job titles, names, education. Any other kind of like specific language or the way that a resume is framed that you look at that you can just tell, given your extensive knowledge on it, that this is a good candidate?
Yeah, so we do analyze the resume. So if we have a position open, let's say, for example, in protein chemistry, if we have a protein chemistry position open, typically at companies like Genentech that are doing the true drug discovery and development, there is more of a particular nuance to that role. So it may be protein chemistry with an emphasis in antibody drug conjugates, or some other type of requirement that will make a candidate stand out beyond others. So that's just really looking very closely at the role. If that information is not readily available, we try to make that as upfront as possible. And usually that information is found in the summary of the role, where you'll look at, what this position actually entails. So look for those keywords yourself too. So if you see, a protein chemistry position and you want to know whether you're qualified, look at what the person's actually going to be doing. And then that can be a really good indicator.
And so for the job postings, for example, like the keywords in the job postings, you want to pay does your team have any influence over the language used in the job posting, or is that strictly HR? Like, what's kind of the interplay between you and the other teams for hiring, whether it's HR or the department that's actually they're going to be hired into, et cetera?
So the role, we are part of HR, so we do have influence over the way that looks, but the actual description comes from the business. So the hiring manager is the person who describes the role and puts in the detail of the position. Where we help influence the role is we set what the minimum qualifications are. There has to be a standard that we're held to by OFCCP compliance, which is the government, tells us that we have to adhere to certain rules, such as, the minimum requirement around education and the number of years of experience are what we must define in a job description. And that's actually a filter for us too. So if we have a position, let's say that's posted as a PhD with 2+ years experience, if we have individuals at a master's and bachelor's level that are applying, then we typically will not look at those individuals or consider them because they're not meeting that minimum requirement.
Okay. And In terms of those regulations, that's something we're always curious about. I don't know if it matters more for like because you've had experience at different types of companies, in terms of a job posting, like a job has to be
Hmm.
posted for a certain amount of time if the company's publicly traded. Like, is there any other kind of regulations that you can enlighten us on in terms of the job postings themselves?
Yes, so a position, if it is one that is going external, and even, we know that we might have an internal candidate, we still do have to have it posted for at least 3 days externally. And then that could be taken down if we do not get candidates in those 3 days, and then we have the internal pool. The federal guidelines that we're held accountable to is the fact that we do have government contracts, so we do have to consider candidates, based on their qualifications. So that's really what we have to adhere to. We can't go outside of that, because then that could be, if we consider one candidate outside of those minimum qualifications, then we would have to consider all candidates. So we're
Mm.
really very cognizant of following those guidelines.
And which kind of minimum qualifications are you talking about again?
That's the
In general.
education requirement,
So
and
just
then
the
the
education.
years of experience. Yeah.
Okay.
So sometimes you'll see something that says 0 years of experience, which may seem odd, but really what that means is somebody coming right out of academia.
Yeah, and it's surprising because we have obviously most of our PhDs, their first jobs are 0 years, but they'll apply to
Yeah.
we see on average the 2 to 5 year one, and they apply, and a lot of them get hired with the 2 to 5 years. So I'm guessing you just have to. How would that work then in your case where you can't not have the two? Can you count postdoctoral work? Can you not count graduate school work as
Yeah.
okay?
I mean, I think that, and I think that you always want to think of the minimum. So if it says 0 years minimum,
Sure.
if you have a few years, that's okay. The range is something we really try to move away from, because again, you could have somebody that counts their PhD graduate work as experience.
Yes.
So that could maybe mean that they have 7 years of experience in their mind,
Hmm.
where, others may say that they're only counting their postdoctoral experience. So that's very subjective.
Sure.
That's where we encourage our business partners in HR to frame that as 2+ years, or, to get out of the range piece, because it
Ah,
may make people feel like they're being excluded if they have more than that range.
okay. Very interesting. So I'm
Does
gonna.
that make sense?
It does make sense. I'm just curious, like if I'm applying for a job out of graduate school, let's say, because postdoc, there's more experience there. So let's take the case scenario where you've been in academia your whole life, you're a graduate student. How would you frame something on a resume to at least get looked at? Would you say, graduate research assistant? Would you, let's say I applied to a job that required a certain number of experience. Um, how about, well, from your point of view, what have you trained the hiring managers to look for in that case? Like, are they just looking for words like graduate research assistant to know that that's a different kind of experience? Or I'm just trying to
No, I
clarify.
would say, the I would say that the first thing we look at, we look at the top part of the resume. So if you have 2 years of working in protein expression as a graduate assistant, just call it out that way. If
Nice.
that's what the role is calling for,
Hmm.
always tailor your resume towards what the job description is, as long as you're being transparent, of course, and honest. And if you have been working as you have a biochemistry PhD, but 2 years of that is actually working in protein expression,
Hmm.
doing certain projects, even as a mentor, or if you've worked on specific publications around that area, highlight that at the very top of the CV so that we can actually see that, and then that pulls us in even more to find out about
Yes.
the candidate.
Exactly what I was looking for. So thank you for that. And so again, for those of you listening, that's the crucial part. Like your experience with the techniques and the skills that they're looking for. It's not
Mm-hmm.
like you have to have exact industry experience at a company. So, that's why we talk a lot about pulling out the highlights, just like Erin just said, putting it in your professional summary at the top of the resume, crucial part, the most important part, obviously, of your resume. And you just heard it from Erin as well. So uh, one other piece to this kind of puzzle, I think, and then we can kind of get back on script is uh, referrals. This is something we hear all different things too, and a lot of whether it's talent acquisition, recruiters, whatever they can get kind of picky on what they want to see. For example, we've heard get your referrals, but make sure you also put yourself in the system. right? Don't just think that the referral is enough. We've heard some people say referrals, of course they help a little bit, but not much. Other people say, yeah, a referral is huge if it's from the right person. So what kind of, from your point of view, where do referrals kind of fit in? Obviously, we see it over and over again. You get a referral. I mean, these are where most of the hires are coming from that we're seeing. We don't, it's much more rare to not know anybody in the company, upload a resume and get hired, than it is to know somebody, get that referral, and then get an interview and get hired. So from your point of view,
Yes,
what do you think?
I agree.
Mm,
I agree. I think about my own experience, and most of my positions were because I knew somebody within the company. The person would that I've worked with previously had reached out to me and said, "We have a position. Would you be interested?" So I think having a referral, it's a really good door opener for you, especially if it's somebody that's a trusted source for you. So let's say a scientist that's working at Genentech, and the scientist comes to you and says, "We have a new position open. Is this something that might interest you?" And you're interested, that person giving their endorsement of you as a candidate has a lot of weight. And as you've already pointed out, Isaiah, we have to look at hundreds of CVs sometimes. So if we have one of our employees saying, you know, um, Joe is a great candidate and I think you should consider him for this role, it does help to get more
mm.
attention towards the candidate for sure.
Yeah. So again, this is something for those of you listening, you've heard over and over again, but it's great to hear once again, especially from somebody, who's worked with Genentech, Amgen, and so forth. Um, that being said, you want to attack your job search from every different angle, of course. And another angle we haven't touched on yet is your LinkedIn profile. So what can you tell us, just a bird's eye view, how you use LinkedIn? Um, and we'll just start there to get your kind of, from your point of view, and then I'll ask a few more questions.
Sure. So the way that we use LinkedIn is we do specific candidate searching. So we do Boolean searching for particular roles. Those of us that are in a headhunting capacity at roles or at companies like Genentech and Amgen, we are aligned to specific groups where we're looking for candidates with a very complex background. So again, I'll use the example of antibody drug conjugates. If I'm looking for somebody that has that specific background, I'm going to be looking for key terms such as ADC and the words spelled out antibody drug conjugate. I look for, which institutions they're working at, what their pedigree is, and so on. So we have certain filters that we look for. If you want to work in a certain area.
Sorry, because no, that's so when you say look for, you mean like search in LinkedIn, like
search. Yeah, we're looking for you. Yeah, we'll reach out. Mm-hmm.
No, that's crucial because so what she just said is that she'll search an acronym and the actual word, as in like
right.
a LinkedIn search, like a Google search, typing it in the computer. For all of you that know, so it's that literal. So don't think that you want to change these different words and be clever. It's that literal for the search terms.
Yeah, and I think I've seen with LinkedIn where people are now, and I think this is the LinkedIn influence, but this does not really apply to those of us working in science. I see people using creative titles around, scientific innovator. It sounds great, but when it comes to the actual search process for us, we're looking for you as a postdoc, a graduate student, a scientist. We're not looking, we don't have the ability to break down all those creative titles that people are applying. So if you're really serious about finding a position, I would stick to what your actual role is because that's what we're looking for.
No, that's very helpful too, and I think that's an important clarifying point because we obviously say put the exact keywords in your headline. It's the most important in terms of LinkedIn search algorithm. Yeah. We do say put in, and I would love to hear your take, even if you're just like, don't ever do that. We always say, just because it's a conversation starter, at least one of those little terms, you can add something that shows you're well-rounded outside of science. What is your take on that? Do you actually care at all if they have any other things going on besides what you're looking for as a recruiter on their LinkedIn profile or their resume? Like the volunteer organizations or whatever.
No.
Just the nuts and bolts.
It's really for linked. So the way that we use the linked, at least at Genentech, and I can only speak from my own perspective, but the way that my team and I look for candidates is we're really focused on your skill set and experience. we will vet out all of your softer skills, as people call them, or some of those transferable skills during our conversation. But really, we want to just get to the core of what you've been doing so that we can align that to, again, the minimum qualifications of a position.
Great. And that goes in line with a question we had come in about soft skills. So, of course, these are important. They're usually not important until later in the process. So you never want to sacrifice, obviously,
Yeah.
the core skill sets, the actual keywords that are in the job posting. Never sacrifice this to the softer skills or being clever. But at the same time, sprinkling some of those in, especially on a LinkedIn profile that has a million sections now, is fine for later.
Yes.
Great clarifying point. And what does it look like from your end in terms of LinkedIn? Because there's a recruiter type of LinkedIn, right? So more advanced.
Yep.
So what are some of the filters that view of LinkedIn has? I'm just curious.
There's a lot of filters. We actually try not to over filter because that can get tricky too. Again, when it comes to something specific, like around the years of experience, what I may think is your years of experience could be different from what you believe. So the filters that we typically use are around, again, we do Boolean around specific key terms. If there is, and LinkedIn doesn't have every single skill that we'd like, but if there is a role that we're working on that's specific to like protein expression or, biomarker technology, then we'll put that information into. But we really try to not make it so narrow. That's the other thing that's tricky with the titles is we have the functionality to break it down by title, but people have different titles within different academic institutions and also in industry. So we really, it comes down to the core skill set and those keywords, like I mentioned.
Perfect. Yeah. And so you mentioned a word Boolean, just so for everybody knows, this is where you can search for this, but not this, or this and this, or this, but not this, stuff like this. So it helps. It just is it's a search function. And for, everyone here has research experience. Think about how you would search something on PubMed. If you're too specific, you're not going to find what you want. So this is the same kind of thinking that goes into searching for the right candidates.
Which we also do use PubMed to search. So we are looking for you on PubMed. If we find you on PubMed, then we will then go over to LinkedIn to find more information about you. So we have a lot of ways of trying to find scientific talent, but PubMed is absolutely one of them, and Google Scholar. Yep. Both.
And I love that because I think sometimes we can forget that. I mean, this is your job. This is your sole purpose. And it's a little bit competitive too. You want to find the best candidate, so you're going after it.
Right.
And that's why, for some of you, maybe you've had a call with different recruiters, whatever else, know your audience. It's much more to the point. Like they have these things that you need to hit with the technical skills you brought up, protein expression, et cetera. Really, you just want to look at the job posting and whatever you can from referrals or informational interviews to know what those words are. Now, for transferable skills, I want to dip into those a little bit. I know they're not important till later, but are there certain things that you really look for in terms of transferable skills from PhDs, like any non-technical skills, even if it's verbiage or whatever?
Yeah. So I would say the big ones that we look for are clear and concise communication skills. Really, that's probably number one. Also being collaborative. So any way that you can demonstrate and give examples of how you've collaborated, that's great, especially for a company like Genentech, which has a very academic-like setting. I would also say, in addition to that, looking for people who have agility. Right now we're working at a time where you may be hired to do a certain project, but then that project could go away based on what happens with the molecule, and we need you to now work on something else. So having that open mindset to be agile and work with the business needs.
I love that word a lot, and I'm going to put that on there. I'm going to type that in for all of you. We hear things like flexibility and stuff, but really agility is a much better descriptor. Thank you for that. So let's turn the conversation a little bit now to like the don'ts, what you hate to see on resumes, what would just give you a bad kind of taste in your mouth right away on a candidate, big fails that you've seen even after the resume process, like on the initial phone screen. Maybe we can start with a few of those.
Sure. I think from a resume standpoint, the biggest, I wouldn't say that I dislike or hate, but where I see candidates maybe not being clear with what they actually do. So we don't mind looking at a 20-page CV. We're fine with looking at your publications and everything, but when it comes to your actual role, be really concise. Get to the point of what your function is. So if you're a graduate assistant and you're working on a specific project, just put that out there. You don't need to write, 3 or 4 paragraphs about it. Just put the main points of what your work is. So include those keywords, include how you're, possibly leading or doing some type of resource management, anything that could apply to the type of work that would be listed on the position, right? So if you're looking at a lab head position and they need somebody who can not only be a scientific leader, but also manage resources, highlight that in your CV and your actual skill function. And then please, for positions that are in science, if you're looking to stay on the bench, keep all your publications, patents, everything on the CV. That's very relevant to at least the way Genentech and Amgen and other companies that I work for, we're all looking for that. We want to see what you've done, and that's really important to us. So that's the CV point. Do you want me to go into the other point, or do you have another question?
No, I think this, yeah, let's move on to, because I want to talk about phone screens. Well, first, maybe you can clarify where your part ends. Like, do you do phone screens yourself?
Yes, I talk to candidates myself. So whether that's a direct applicant or somebody that I've headhunted, I will speak with you first. As a representative of the company, I want you to have some information about the role, but also I'd like to hear what you know about us. So we get, I think as an employer, we want to know why you want to work for Genentech. That's, I think, one of the 2 biggest pet peeves I have when it comes to candidates is, number one, if they don't know anything about our science and what we're doing. I mean, we're very mission driven. We've been around for 40 years. We have an amazing portfolio, not only in research, but also on the market. So we've made such a huge impact on the industry. We want to know that you also have done a little bit of research to find that out for yourself. But the second piece is when a candidate will come to us on LinkedIn and say, I'm a graduate student. Can you help me find a job? So we're not an agency. Those of us that are working at the company, you have to understand that we're actually working to fill the need for the company. We don't act as agents for candidates. So if you are interested in our position, come equipped with the position that you're interested in and let us help you that way. I mean, the more information you provide up front, the more that we can engage with you. Otherwise, we're not going to conduct a search for you within our own company to find the right position. It's just, that would be an impossible undertaking for all the candidates that we have reaching out to us.
And so stay on the phone screen for a minute. You want to obviously see how enthusiastic they are about the position. You also want to see what they know about the company. You want to see they've done their homework, all that stuff. What else are you looking for on a phone screen?
We're looking for examples. So whether that's an example of the specific work that you're doing, if you're leading a project in biochemistry, or discovery oncology, tell us about that. How did you lead? Who did you lead? What did you do? How did it make an impact? Those are the types of things that we want to hear.
Thank you for joining us for another Industry Careers for PhDs podcast. If you're interested in attending one of these interviews live, or if you're interested in getting access to the full interview, including all of the background materials and show notes, go to cheekyscientist.com/association and learn how to become an associate. You can get on the waitlist for the next association enrollment period there and learn full details about the program. It's a program specifically designed to help PhDs transition into top industry positions. If you would like to receive more of these interview highlights via our podcast sent directly to your email, go to cheekyscientist.com and email subscribe under where it says Start Here. If you haven't already, you can also subscribe to this podcast on iTunes. Until next week, remember your value as a PhD and start thinking and acting like a successful industry professional.